This meeting is being recorded. I'll ask everyone when they speak to make sure they turn on their microphone, since we do need to have this meeting recorded. Also, we will have members on the phone, and they will only hear you if you use the microphone. And I would also ask you, for their benefit, that when you do speak, you let them know who you are, announce who you are, so that they will know, since they can't see us, only hear us. So as we go through the meeting, folks who have called into the meeting are going to have their phones muted to eliminate background noise. And through the course of the meeting, when folks on the phone need to speak, we will unmute you so that we can hear you. And again, I will call on council members around the table first before we call on folks on the phone. And I understand that there's a little bit of a time delay. And then in the past, some folks who were on the phone wanted to speak, but we kind of ran past them in terms of just the technical logistics of getting them unmuted and giving them an opportunity to speak. So you might hear a little bit of lull now and then to make sure we don't do that moving forward. And lastly, in terms of housekeeping items, if folks need to speak to each other around the table, number one, if these microphones are very sensitive, they will pick up your conversations. And number two, it could get to the point where some of that background noise could be creating interruptions for the rest of us. So I would ask you to, if you need to have that caucus, please go out into the anteroom there and do that. That way you won't be overheard, and it will not interrupt our discussions. So everybody has an agenda, I believe, at their... Everyone should have an agenda at their seats. I think we will start the meeting by asking members around the table to introduce themselves. And I will start and go to my right. And again, I'm Tom Bushotsky, the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources and the chairman of the council. So, Terry Sue.
Water company?
Is there some trick to make the green light come on? Wade Noble, Yuma County Agriculture Water Coalition.
Jay Tonkus, designee for Maria Dadgar, Intertribal Council of Arizona.
Craig Sullivan with the County Supervisors Association.
Jamie Kelly, Mojave County Water Authority.
Phil Townsend, Yuma.
Kevin Rogers, Arizona Cotton Growers Association.
Chelsea McGuire, designee for Stephanie Smallhouse, Arizona Farm Bureau.
Kathy Ferris, attorney.
Tim Tomier, Director of Tucson Water.
Misael Cabrera, Director of the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality.
Basilio Aja, Arizona Cattle Feeders.
Warren Tenney, Arizona Municipal Water Users Association.
Rob Anderson, sitting in for Spencer Camps, Home Builders Association.
Virginia O'Connell, Arizona Water Banking Authority.
John Kamik, Southern Arizona Water Users Association.
Ron Doba, Northern Arizona Municipal Water Users Association.
Sarah Porter, Kyle Center for Water Policy.
Philip Richards, APS.
Steve Miller, Pinal County Supervisor.
Dave Roberts with Salt River Project.
Representative Charlene Fernandez, House Democratic Leader.
Courtney McKinstry, designee for Glen Hammer, Arizona Chamber.
Senator Sina Kerr, designee for President Karen Fan. Pursued All Agribusiness and Water Council of Arizona.
Representative Gail Griffin, Arizona House.
Thank you. Now, do we have members on the telephone that would like to introduce themselves? And we need to take a quick pause because Teresa will unmute you, but she was fixing Wade's microphone. So we'll just hang for a second. All right. Anyone on the phone? Members of the council?
This is David Brown. I'm in St.
Sorry, there were two people speaking at the same time, so could you repeat that?
This is David Brown. I'm in St. John's today. Thank you.
Hi, David. Anyone else?
Yeah, Ted Maxwell with Southern Arizona Leadership Council.
Welcome. Anyone else on the phone? All right, thank you. I also want to recognize that with us today we have County Supervisor Miller from Pinal County and Richard Lunt from Greenlee County. We also have Gary Gold representing Senator Sinema and Chase Castle from representing Senator McSally. And hopefully I didn't miss anyone else out there in the audience. So with that, we can move on into our agenda, starting with item number 2, our committee updates. And again, we talked last time about carrying over 2 committees from the former council, and we're going to hear from the chairman of those 2 committees. But first I want to mention that as we move forward with committees in this new council format, we are going to make sure that as committee work products are finalized and are moved to the council for their review and consideration, that we're going to try to get those reports out to the council members 3 weeks before the council meeting so they can have some time to review the materials. And at the same time, we will post those materials on the website for the council, at the DWR's website. We'll have the address and things at the end here, but again, to make sure that the public has an opportunity as well to see the materials. So we're going to start out now with the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee, and Wade Noble is going to give us an update on where they're at. Take it away, Wade.
Okay. That wasn't what I anticipated as the first slide. Okay. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee has been studying possibilities, options with regards to augmentation of water supply that are available, have been used, could be used. And in doing that, we have developed a preliminary report that is in an early draft form. And going to the last slide of my presentation, the last item, we expect to have it delivered to ADWR and the council to meet the director's 3 weeks in advance distribution date. So in September, you're going to get the report. some of the things that we've been looking at. If you have questions or you want to make comments on them, we'll be glad to take that. We probably are not going to spend a whole lot of time discussing things today. This is just to give you kind of a snapshot look at what we've been doing. So, in evaluating the feasibility of water augmentation options to help the planning areas within Arizona, here are some augmentation opportunities that we have developed. First, ocean desalination. The discussion in the report is a little brief on ocean desalination because those options are not really ready, even though we've been working on them for years, to come forward under the auspices of this council. The next one, brackish groundwater desalination, is moving along, and we believe that that'll come to fruition if it's not already, I won't use in the ground, but if it's not already working out, it's getting closer and closer. I know one item that is of extreme importance to many people around the table is what to do about groundwater extraction from the Harquahela and Butler valleys. We're looking at that. We will have part of that, or we will have that in the report. In an area we call best practices. We don't call this new water, but what we call this is things that we can do that will improve water utilization. We're looking at agricultural water conservation, enhancing aquifer storage, reclaimed water utilization, and municipal water conservation. Next, we are discussing processes that may be needed within an augmentation or best practices options, such as regulatory revisions, groundwater and surface water exchanges, groundwater and surface water transfers, water banking, and aquifer recharge. Okay. The augmentation ideas embedded in other water augmentation options. We did that one. Here we go. Okay. These projects and practices between willing parties that improve water utilization. We did have some second thoughts about that first item. It said that we were going to firm water supply for lower Colorado River water users. That caught my attention very quickly because I thought that down in Yuma County we had a really firm water supply for lower Colorado River water users, but what it really meant is lower priority. We made that change, and I'm happier about that now. Modify the operation of Roosevelt Dam to use the flood control space, and the connection, a stronger connection between SRP and CAP. Who could argue? Oh, that's an interconnect facility. I'm sorry, Dave. Okay, needing further development. Cloud seeding, phreatophyte management, watershed management. Those are projects that are in progress in many areas. I don't think there's any of those three items that isn't being developed and worked on now, but we need to go farther with them. Cloud seeding has its pros and cons. Phreatophyte management's going to have some issues going one way or the other, and watershed management, the need is incredibly great, but we're working on it. The impediments to augmentation that we're looking at is you're not going to be able to augment in many situations unless we do Indian water rights settlements, we do the adjudications. Those things are working hand in hand, and we've got to get them done, not only for augmentation, but for the certainty that's needed for us to go forward with regards to the supply. The last thing that we have is impediments to water augmentation is groundwater management planning. I think we need to do a little bit more on that. Actually, there are those who will say we're way behind. So finally, this is a 3-day, and we'll wrap it up. On Tuesday, June 25th, the committee is going to meet, and we're going to try to complete the report. because of some of the things that have come up in the last 24 hours that will be coming up today, I suspect that we're going to have meetings other than Tuesday, June 25th, in order to complete the report. On Wednesday, however, August 21st, or before, we plan to deliver the completed report to the council. We're going to move that back, and probably going to be at least the 14th, so that the council can turn it around and deliver it to the council, or DWR can turn it around and deliver it to the council 3 weeks in advance, which the director just promised. And then on Thursday, September 8th, we will present the report to the council and have a full discussion on it. Are there questions?
Questions from members of the council? Before we move to the phone, I want to say a couple of things. One, in relation, Wade, to best practices for conservation, we might hear some of that later today in the agenda item number 4. We're heading with some of that. I want to let everyone know that in terms of the ocean desal, discussions with Mexico under Minute 323 continue in that regard, looking at potential opportunities for binational benefits for projects in the Sea of Cortez. The anticipated end date of that study process is, I believe, June of 2020. I will say that I asked Wade and this committee to do what Wade reported and to defer, essentially, to that process. The Mexican folks are very nervous about that study for a variety of reasons, including concerns over identifying sites potentially that would result in people buying up the land and kind of jacking up prices, or buying up rights of way for pipelines, and also for the perception that it's simply a situation where Mexico is selling their water to the United States. So in that regard, we try to be mindful of those concerns and asked that committee to really let that process play out until 2020 comes around. I also want to give Representative Griffin a chance to talk. One of the items that came up at the first meeting was storage and recharge areas around the state, specifically on state land. There was a study that was done, and I think that study should be referred to the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee, but Representative Griffin, I don't know if you want to weigh in a little bit more on that issue.
Yes, I do have the study and the legislation that was that prompted that study, and I think we need to take another look at it. The report where the study mentions dams, and nowhere in the bill did it mention the word dams, but there's a lot of places throughout the state that we can do additional water conservation. Cochise County is doing a lot of that, and so I would like to meet with whoever and take another look at that study and improve on it.
Do you think you'll be available to attend the meeting on the 25th?
I'll make sure I'm available on the 25th.
Okay. We'll block out plenty of time for it.
Thank you.
And I would also suggest, in terms of the timing, if substantial work will be of value as we incorporate that study into the committee, I think it would be valuable still wait for you to meet the deadline for September, and we can add that in as we go along. I would hate to delay moving forward with other pieces that the committee has looked at, not losing sight of this other opportunity. Does that sound reasonable?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Between the department and Carollo, we're moving along really well, even though the committee constantly gives them new directions. It's all Bruce and Chuck. I try to stay on the course, but it's Bruce and Chuck. They come in and say, no. Yeah.
Bruce and Chuck who?
Bruce Howland, Chuck Cullum,
SRP and CAP.
I didn't say that.
I did.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Lisa.
What's your favorite land commissioner? Given that this report includes the State Land Department, Mr. Noble, would you mind if I joined your committee? May I please join your committee? Let me rephrase that.
I didn't think that was a question.
Okay, well, because the report includes state land, the State Land Department is more than happy to join your committee.
We would be glad to have you,
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Okay, we didn't have an opportunity to move to folks on the phone. Questions or comments there on the phone for members? Did we have sufficient time to unmute staff?
This is David. I don't have any.
All right, thanks. So we will move on then to the report regarding the Desalination Committee. And we do have a new chairman, Bob Lotz, the former chairman, retired, I think, in March. Is that right? So we miss Bob working in this committee, miss working with Bob on lots of other issues. But Philip Richards took over the chairmanship of that committee, and I'll turn it over to Philip to give that update.
Thanks, Tom. So this will be brief. First of all, I want to thank the council for allowing me to work on the DSAL committee. I look forward to it. And then I'd also like to thank the other committee members. Is it on? It's on. There we go. I'd like to thank the other committee members for taking time out of their schedule. I know we're all busy, so I appreciate them taking time to work on this committee. It's been a while since we've met, and we haven't met since Bob left. But we do have a meeting scheduled for June 28th at 10 a.m. at this building. So all here are invited, and if you can make it, please do so. I want to thank Cindy for helping me set up that meeting. I really do appreciate it. We're currently working on an agenda, and we'll have that out in the next couple days, so look for that to be emailed out to you. So again, the next meeting will be June 28th. It's up there on the screen if you can see it. June 28th, 10 a.m. here at ADWR. And that's all I have to report at this time. I look forward to more at the next meeting.
Thanks, Philip. Any questions or comments for Philip? Folks around the table? Seeing none. David on the phone or others on the phone?
We would say that the new chair... I resist.
So, Wade, maybe for a present, when you get the report 3 weeks ahead of time, I'll buy you a tie.
Did you have to go with somebody so young?
I won't have to retire for a while, so I'll be here for a while.
All right, moving on. So we'll move on to agenda item number 3, and we are going to have a report on the M36 Water Loss Program, Phase 2 update. You recall that DWR and WIFA did a program, and this is about lost and unaccounted for water, and we were trying to focus that program mainly on areas outside of the active management areas, since the active management area water providers already have a regulatory requirement for lost and unaccounted for water. But we're going to give you an update on Phase 2, and I think there are some lessons we learned from Phase 1. And Cindy Rule, Water Resource Specialist in Statewide Planning, is going to run us through that presentation. And we will have the full report posted to the Council's website later today. So, Cindy, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom. So the water loss control program, Phase 2, is a carryover from the original GWAC goal, being to reduce water loss in Arizona. The American Water Works Association's M36 manual details the industry best practice for water loss management, and that is called the M36 methodology. By applying the M36 methodology, the disaggregated components of water loss help water utilities to identify where their losses are occurring and what intervention strategies the water utility can consider. This program, Phase 2, was just completed last month, and it's referred to as Phase 2 because Phase 1, that had been reported to the GWAC about a year ago, was a pilot program with just 6 water systems, and it was sponsored by WIFA and ADWR, and Kavanaugh was the consultant that did the training. So that pilot program went well, and it was well received, so WIFA and ADWR decided to fund the same program and technical training and extend it to the 25 water systems, hence the Phase 2. And you can see the money invested in Phase 2 on this slide. So system recruitment for participation into the program was conducted collaboratively between WIFA and ADWR. Recruitment of Phase 2 participants was targeted to small and medium-sized systems, private and public, inside and outside the AMAs, and geographically spread across the state. And as you can see by the map here, we have the geographical spread. The ones that are circled are outside. Those are the water systems that are outside the AMAs. There were 9 of them and 16 systems within the AMA. Here's a little snapshot of one of the pages from the final report, which you will be able to see. It will be posted this afternoon on the Water Council's website, on ADWR's website. And this is some of the things that is discovered during this training by each utility company. As part of the analysis and audit, it shows the water company where they are losing revenue and where they are losing water. This example for this particular water company, who shall remain anonymous for this presentation, during this 12-month period, their water loss was 184 acre-feet per year, which equated to their bottom line, their revenue dollars of losing about $90,000 that year. Now, this water loss is divided in 2 general categories. The orange being what's called real water loss, and that's the actual infrastructure leakage. In this case, you can see this chart on the left is shown by volume, by acre-feet. The chart on the right translates that into dollars lost. So this particular company, for instance, lost about 71 acre-feet of real water, their actual leakage. These other losses are things such as unbilled metered. It's metered, but nobody got billed for it. They didn't get any dollars for it. Or there is unauthorized consumption, as something like the customer metering inaccuracies and no calibration on the meters, et cetera. So this methodology helps the water utility companies be able to sort out between what is a system error and what is an actual physical infrastructure leakage. And for the last slide here, this is a summary of real water loss across all 25 water systems. The report, when you take a look at the report is focused on individual water systems because they're the ones that went through the audit and the analysis, and the point was to show them where their losses were and to give them recommendations how to remedy those. But here I just thought we would take a look at over 25 systems, how much total water was lost in that 12-month period. I did it again. For instance, 5,841 acre-feet on 25 systems. And remember, these are small to medium systems, a total connection of about 130,000 connections. And with the median connection for the utility company at about 3,500 connections. The amount of water that was supplied by those 25,000 was over 52,000 acre-feet. And overall, out of 25 water systems, there was 11%, this is real water, leakage from infrastructure, 11% infrastructure leakage. These are, once again, small to medium, inside and outside the AMAs. To those 25 systems, almost $1.5 million lost just in the physical water loss. So as the chair has mentioned, the report will be posted this afternoon to the ADWR website. If you look under the New Water Council's web page, you will find this report fresh off the press. You'll be able to see every single company's results as well as what their recommendations are. The report that was completed and presented to the GWAC last year is also on the website. It's on the GWAC web page within ADWR, which is different than the New Water Council page. In the same area, you'll be able to find them. So both reports are posted there. Any questions?
Questions or comments from folks around the table?
I forgot to mention Ann.
Warren.
Thank you, Tom. Just wanted to note that this is a really good program. Really pleased that the department, based on the recommendation of the council, has pursued this. It's as you start digging in and really looking at the complexity of what all occurs in a utility with water loss, this is a really helpful assistance program, and it's an issue that, whether small or large, it's something for utilities to take a look at, because there's real potential savings there as you start looking at it. So just wanted to say again, I'm glad that the department's been working on this assistance program.
Thanks, Warren. Anyone else? Yes. It's Senator Kerr.
Just a quick question. Was this the first study of its kind? So does this set the baseline? And also, did these water companies conduct their own audits, and how did that compare to these findings, if they did?
I'll answer what I can on that. This was the second one that I'm aware of in the state, the first being the pilot program, which was just with 6 water systems, kind of testing to see how it would all work. Kavanaugh is a consulting firm that does this across the country. Some states actually require a certified audit, and they can do that. But each company actually did their own audit prior to getting the training. It was part of being the program, because they were into this process for almost a year. So they did their own water audit. They brought those results to this training program, worked with the consultant for lots of months, and then in a 2-day workshop as well. And then they were able to see the difference between how they were doing it and what the M36 methodology offered.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. I don't know if this is the report that's on DWR's website, but I went through the M36. It might have been the first phase. It identified some locales, not just water companies, but locales, and I'm not going to mention names, but was the intent of this is once you gather all of this, then because there were some disparities, there were some, that were quite high and some not very high. Is it the intent that this group's going to look at that and then do something with it, or we're just gathering information on the M36 and you're going to deal with the water companies and the municipalities separately?
So, Bess, I think what you're asking is, should this council consider coming up with tools that would help those entities that are having issues with large volumes of lost and unaccounted for water? I think that's what you're asking, correct? And I'll throw that out to the council. Is that something we want to do? Do we want to explore what tools are out there? I would imagine financial assistance and things like that are possibilities. Would be in the purview of the budget of the legislature and the governor's office, I would guess. But it's certainly something that I think is worthwhile to look into. Collecting up the data, I think, could give the opportunity for the individual entities themselves to make some improvements. But I think we know that outside of the large water providers, those smaller entities often don't have the resources, staff or otherwise, to be able to take advantage of that information that we've now collected and created. So if that is the desire of the council, I would be happy to have DWR look at perhaps reaching out to some of those entities and asking them what kind of help from the state level they think might be of value to them, and come back with some suggestions for the council. So comments on that? Sarah.
I'm interested that some states are requiring M36 audits, and I'm not proposing we go there, but I'd be interested in how other places are incentivizing or assisting water systems in doing the audits and then implementing infrastructure repairs and all the other kinds of changes. So, as part of that report, it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about what's happening in other places.
And Sarah, we will look at that as part of moving forward with this issue. Kathy.
Tom, do we have a sense of how these numbers compare across the nation? If Kavanaugh is doing this all over the place in the United States, do we have a sense of where this falls? And second question is, don't the management plans within the AMAs have a water lost and unaccounted for water requirement? I thought it was 10%, but I could be wrong.
There is that standard for the AMAs, but we leave it up to those entities to comply if we find that they're out of compliance. But we will look at how this might compare, and we will look to see what tools are out there. And again, I think more importantly, what could be of value to the entities in terms of getting their numbers down to something that are in the single digits. I will say it that way. Representative Griffin.
Thank you. I would think that if there's small water systems asking for assistance, we should be listening to them and see how we can help them. We do have the Small Water Systems Fund that we have set up before.
Thank you.
Tom,
I would agree with that as well. I have a question about just how much information Kavanaugh collected during this process. Did they just do an analysis of what the loss was, or did they identify within those systems where the losses are occurring and make recommendations regarding how to remediate those losses?
Yes. That's these are some of the components of loss that they were able to tease out with that audit and analysis. And yes, it was part of the program that then they made recommendations to each custom fit to each one of the utility companies of how they can remedy those errors, those losses.
Okay. Well, since the majority of it seems to be a physical loss, did they identify in the system where those might be occurring? Did they go that far or not?
No.
No, okay, all right.
I have one further question. The 25 systems that were checked, was there a notice sent out to all the water companies for these volunteers that wanted their systems to be analyzed, or how was that arrived at?
That was a joint effort between WIFA and ADWR, and we gathered together a list of from small to medium size, and sent out letters and also sent out emails and posted it on both the WIFA and the ADWR website. And I don't remember how many that we sent out total, how many we identified as being small to medium, but we had 20 willing volunteers, or 25, pardon me.
Anyone else? I'll pause my requisite 8 seconds for folks on the phone. Not hearing anything, we will move on. So the next agenda item is a discussion of the active management area management plans. At the last council meeting, some members requested an informational update to learn what's going on with the active management areas and their plans to date. We did have our performance audit and sunset review by the Auditor General. One of their issues they pointed out was that DWR is behind schedule in promulgating the fourth and potentially fifth active management area plans. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. To respond to that issue, the department has recently restructured its staff. We've created 2 new positions that are exclusively dedicated to the development and adoption of the management plans. These positions report essentially to the director and will have access to various sections within the department to make sure that our other staff can help support and collect the data and information we need. And so hopefully that will allow us to accelerate the creation of the fourth management plans. And there's really no catching up to the deadlines. They're passed. But maybe we can meet the deadlines for the fifth management plan. So we'll go through a relatively detailed discussion here. And as we're going through it, keep in mind that the next agenda item about new committees, this will help inform that process as well as what we're recommending there to the council for their consideration. So our new program manager is Natalie Mast, and she will go through the presentation.
Thank you, Tom. Am I on? Yes. Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Natalie Mast. Like Tom said, I work on the management plans here at ADWR. Today I'll be talking you through some background on the active management areas, the management plans, some definitions and history, where we are now, and where we are planning to go moving forward. So we'll start at the beginning. What are the management plans? I think most of you should have heard of the Arizona's 1980 Groundwater Management Act. This act created ADWR and put in place a number of structures for water management in the state intended to curb the impacts of severe groundwater overdraft that was being seen in several parts of the state. This slide is in no way comprehensive, but it can start to give you a little bit of an idea of the additive nature of the regulatory structure that the Groundwater Management Act put into place. A few provisions, such as the registration of wells, apply statewide. In irrigation non-expansion areas, or INAs, additional provisions apply, and as the name implies, one of those provisions is a prohibition on the expansion of irrigation acres. In active management areas, then, AMAs, even more provisions apply. The AMAs that you can see here, kind of in the central part, and then Prescott, these are the areas with the highest level of groundwater regulation in the state, and each of the AMAs has its own series of management plans. The Groundwater Management Act defined 5 management periods and instructs that there should be a management plan in each AMA for each management period. These plans contain the conservation programs that are intended to allow each AMA to meet its management goal. So, what are the goals? 4 out of our 5 AMAs essentially have a safe yield type of goal, meaning that the AMA should be moving toward or maintaining a long-term balance between groundwater withdrawals and recharge. The Pinal AMA's goal is a little bit different and makes an effort to preserve water supplies for future uses while preserving the existing agricultural economy. In order to work toward these goals, each management plan, I have one here, they're large documents. Each management plan includes a large amount of information about the functioning of the AMA, both physically and in terms of water management policy. The main regulatory chapters are the ones that contain the conservation programs for each sector, and you can see those here. So when we talk about the municipal GPCD program, all of the details for that program are in Chapter 5. When we talk about the Ag BMP program, all of the details for that program are in Chapter 4 of the management plan. For each of these regulatory chapters, the legal language detailing the requirements of each sector and program is located at the end of the appropriate chapter and is italicized to make it easier to spot. These regulatory chapters are intended to be a single source of truth for those regulated communities. Each sector has various programs that a given user might participate in, and this is where the users can find detailed descriptions of the regulatory and reporting requirements for their conservation programs. So with all this background information about how the management plans were created and how those programs are broken down, where has this gotten us? Where are we now? Most of you have probably seen this chart. We use it a lot, but it is worth reiterating, and celebrating the progress that we have made over time. Since 1980, the state has had dramatic population and economic growth, all while decreasing the amount of water used. We are now using about the same amount of water that we were using statewide 60 years ago. But what about the active management areas, since that last chart was a statewide representation? What role do the management plans play in this? We talked about the 5 successive management periods. Each successive management plan throughout those periods was intended to incrementally expand and tighten the conservation requirements, and with the goal of reducing groundwater withdrawals. In the example you see here of municipal GPCD, which is gallons per capita per day, or a measure of how much water each person is using, we've seen a 25% decline. The orange line is what we're looking at. A 25% decline in the average GPCD of the Phoenix AMA since the late 80s. Additionally, 80% of our population lives inside the AMAs, and the AMAs reflect about 53% of the state's water use. Since 1990, groundwater use in the AMAs has been fairly flat, despite the drastic population growth mentioned earlier being largely concentrated inside those AMAs. Additionally, and apart from conservation allowing us to use water more efficiently, we have also been storing any additional supplies we may have now and saving them for future recovery and use as kind of an insurance policy for times of shortage. The picture is not perfectly rosy, though. Despite making significant strides in the last 30 years, most of the AMAs cannot yet say that they have met their goals. The chart you see on the screen shows annual groundwater overdraft in the Phoenix AMA, with years of overdraft shown in red and years of surplus shown in blue. There is significant year-to-year variability for a variety of reasons, but on average, the long-term balance is still in the direction of overdraft. One way that ADWR can start to do better is through better communication and transparency when it comes to progress toward these goals. To that end, in the remaining 4th management plans and in the 5th management plans, we are imposing a new requirement on ourselves, on ADWR. We will periodically publish an analysis of each AMA's progress toward its goal. It is our hope that with analyses of the conservation programs that are intended to move us toward these goals, this will help open up conversations of what is and isn't working for the AMAs, and conversations on how to continue moving forward for the 5th management plans and beyond. So, what is coming in the remaining 4th management plan? ADWR has assembled a list of recommendations for modifications to the remaining 4th management plans as compared to those that are already published. The main idea for these changes is to introduce incremental adjustments to, I might be out of order here. So, let me back up. Where are we on the management plans? The 4th management period is defined in statute as 2010 to 2020. The intent was for the 4th management plans to be effective for that period, and you can see that we're a little bit behind on that. The Prescott and Tucson AMAs have already adopted their 4th management plans, but the other 3 AMAs, Phoenix, Pinal, and Santa Cruz, are still regulated under their respective 3rd management plans. It is our intent to complete the remaining 4th management plans in the next 2 years, with the draft for the Phoenix 4th management plan coming out later this summer. Research on the 5th management plans will begin in this interim period, and we intend to begin drafting the 5th management plans as soon as the last 4MP is adopted. So, now I'll get to the recommendations for the remaining 4th management plans. The main idea for these changes is to introduce incremental adjustments to all 3 sectors and to better open up conversations on bigger changes that might be made under the 5th management plan. You can see here the types of changes these recommendations include. A restructuring of the BMP point systems for the ag and municipal sectors and higher points targets for these programs. An increase to the irrigation efficiency used to calculate turf allotments, and an adjustment to the highest 25% of water duties in the ag-based program. And these are among several other changes that we are including in the remaining 4th management plan. We will discuss this full list of recommendations and the details of these recommendations in the 1st management plans work group meeting on July 9th at 1 p.m. in the same room in 3175. And we will allow time at that meeting for questions and comments and details on those recommendations. So that leads me into the next section, which is the fifth management plan and beyond. The work group is a first step. The management plans work group will be an ADWR-led forum for the development of the fifth management plan. We will be working to further assess existing programs to identify potential improvements and to develop the next set of management strategies for the fifth management plans and beyond. Like I said earlier, our first meeting will be July 9th at 1 p.m. in the same room, and will detail ADWR's recommendations for the remaining fourth management plans, and then we'll move on to focus on the research and analysis needed to begin work on the fifth management plan. These meetings will be open to the public, and we will have meeting materials posted on ADWR's website. And with that, I would like to thank you all for your time and attention today, and I would gladly take any questions.
So before we have questions, I think the idea here is that DWR will continue to work on the fourth and fifth management plans. We will come back to this council and keep you updated on where changes to the management plans are, rising to the top. Some of those changes might be controversial. We understand that, and we will look to have your feedback through this council at the proper time. But first, we're going to start with the smaller stakeholder groups in these public meetings that Natalie talked about. But I think we saw in the information, the background information on at least the Phoenix AMA and the trend away from safe yield, not towards safe yield. That's what Natalie talked about. And we saw the goal of safe yield is, attempting to achieve safe yield and maintaining it thereafter. And we know that there are real concerns out there about whether we're going to achieve safe yield, how mandatory that achievement is or isn't. All things for discussion in this process and maybe beyond. So we wanted to give the council a preview of at least some of the additional items that can move us closer towards that safe yield goal. These are tools that exist, authorities that exist currently under the law that we believe we can implement, not asking for folks to come up with new ideas, new laws, etc. I think some of that bigger picture discussion of where we go out into the future is really going to come about under agenda item number 5 under new committees for this council. So with that, I will ask for questions and comments by council members on Natalie's presentation and where we're heading with the fourth and fifth management plans. Yes, Charlene.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Natalie. I'm encouraged by what you presented today, but I wanted to talk today about our caucus priorities, and I'm sure that many of us will be part of the stakeholder group on July 9th. Am I correct, Natalie?
It's open, yes.
Okay, I appreciate that. So one of our top priorities is to find ways that we can responsibly reduce the strain we put on our natural resources, and especially our water resources. That means becoming ever more efficient in every sector so that we can use less water overall. And it also means reusing far more of the water we do use. I think together with these two approaches, we would have the best strategies for continuing to grow and thrive in this arid state. I hope that both are included in our conversations about the active management plans and the post-2025 future of the AMAs. We also must recognize the role of data in the conversation. I know you brought that up. We simply have too little information right now about the full extent of our water demands, especially outside of the AMAs. We cannot protect our successes or find answers to our problems without an understanding of our circumstances. In water, that means not just understanding what we have and where we have it, but also where and how much we are using. So I'm eager for all of us to have solution-oriented conversations and about pumping and water use data collection statewide, and I thank you for your hard work, and I know you addressed many of these, and I look forward to this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure you get an invite. Others? So it is really important. I'll just make this pitch that you go back to folks that are part of your constituency, so to speak, and encourage them to participate in these meetings. The first one on the 9th, as Natalie alluded to. We need the stakeholders to weigh in. We need the stakeholders to weigh in on the good, the bad, and perhaps the ugly. If we're going to have these management plans move forward in a meaningful way, we need feedback. We need to know where people really support things and where perhaps there's not support, to try to work out compromises if we need to make sure that we can move forward and create the efficiencies and the water savings that we know we need for our future. So I'll make that pitch, and hopefully there'll be a lot of participation. Kathy.
I want to make sure I speak. Okay. I'm not sure whether you're going to be talking about the need for new authority in this right now, or whether you're going to do that under number 5. So I want to structure my comments to what we're saying.
So right now, the way we put this together, I think, because we are behind in the promulgation of the plans, we thought it best to try to work within the existing authorities that we have to complete those plans. At the same time, and embedded in number 5 when we get there, I think the bigger discussion, the broader policy discussion about what additional authorities we might need, both inside and or outside the active management areas, will come about in the 2 new committees, which we'll get into next. But I am looking for feedback, if that's from this council, about is that the right way to do this? Senator Griffin.
I would think, I'm really pleased with the presentation. I would think we'd look within what we have already to move forward with what we have already.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move to the next agenda item? Pause a second for folks on the phone. Okay, we'll move into agenda item 5. So again, discussion of new committees. So we are proposing that there be a groundwater committee, and really this committee is intended to look at groundwater issues outside the active management areas. We know there are concerns about what's happening with falling water levels in various parts of the state. We know that from the planning area process of the former council. We heard Representative Fernandez talk about some of the issues there. So I think we need to discuss here today the creation of this new committee. And we would be looking to have a chairperson of that committee be from the membership of this council, working with DWR staff, obviously, to organize and move that committee forward. So what are folks' thoughts about stepping up and propping up this new committee, again, to look at the broader issues around the state outside of the active management areas? Is that something folks think is a valuable exercise? Seeing head shaking yes. More importantly, do I have a volunteer to be the chairperson of said committee? The chair reserves the right to appoint somebody if we have no volunteers. So I would really like to see a volunteer from this committee be from someone who largely represents folks around this table outside of the active management areas. Well, while you are all step up and volunteer, we'll move on to the next proposal here. So, active management areas post 2025 is how we're describing this. And certainly, as we form up these committees, if the chair and committee members think there's a better descriptive name for the committee, we're open. This was just our first shot at setting up something for discussion here today. And again, this really is the focus within the active management areas, and where and what do we want those regulatory and planning parts of the active management areas to be moving forward. It could be as broad as reassessing the goal for each active management area. Clearly, the current statutes do not contemplate a management plan past 2025. We believe that the conservation requirements in effect in the fifth management plans get carried forward, whether or not there are additional management plans promulgated. I think my lawyers tell me we would like to have that potentially tightened up to make sure that is the case in law. Those are the types of things we want to talk about. But also, certainly, we're seeing, at least in the example of the Phoenix AMA, again, trending away from safe yield, and what are we going to do about that? Can we simply do that with conservation? What do we need to eventually get there? So what is our post-2025 world going to look like within our active management areas? So again, another really important committee. Again, since the part of the title of this council is innovation, certainly that will be a large part in both of these new committees. What new and innovative tools might we think about creating to achieve the goals that come forth through that committee process? So again, looking for feedback and a volunteer to work with DWR to be the chairperson of that council committee. So comments about the process and or volunteer to be chair? Warren.
Tom, I'm glad that the department is looking at where we were going after 2025. I know the members of AMWA, and I think others in the AMAs would agree that we have greatly benefited from the Groundwater Management Act and the Assured Water Supply rules, and that they've provided a really strong foundation for us. And so it's important to be able to build on that. It's important to figure out how to sustain, how we're going to sustain or actually reach safe yield and then sustain it afterwards. I would be glad to help with that and help chair that. It might be something to consider also a co-chair, or having someone else co-chairing with that. But I would be glad to help with that, because we certainly see this as very important for the future of both the central and southern Arizona.
So thanks, Warren. I think the point about having a co-chair is well taken, since there'll be a bit of work to be done. So I think in both cases, if we can get co-chairs, that would be a great outcome. Anyone else want to volunteer as co-chair for the AMA committee, so to speak? Tim, thank you. So let me also just say that we thought that, at least as a start in the AMA areas, and this might be true for the non-AMAs as well, but we thought we would start with one committee. And maybe there needs to be subcommittees for different AMAs. Maybe in the non-AMA Arizona, there needs to be a focus on different areas since we all know that the one-size-fits-all doesn't really work well. But I think that would be a good topic of discussion for the committee itself, to see how to break that out best, whether that's a subcommittee process or whether that is a separate committee. I think some of the tools developed will have statewide application for the non-AMA or AMA-wide application for the AMA committee. So with that, I think we have our co-chairs for that committee. Anyone that is a member of the council or their designee is certainly welcome to be formally added into the committee. Again, there will be opportunity for public participation in those committees, as there is now in this council as well. So moving back then to the non-AMA, and I think I have a volunteer. 2 volunteers. Representative Griffin.
I'd be happy to help with that.
Thank you. And Jamie. Okay. So we will get together with the chairs and talk about the timing for when perhaps first meetings might occur. Anyone on the phone? I'll take a quick pause if you want to weigh in. So hearing no one on the phone, we do have another question from a council member. Kathy Ferris, go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. About that. So one of the things that I think would be very helpful for these 2 later committees is getting back to the idea of data. So for the post-AMA, post-2025 AMA, it really will be helpful to understand where the overdraft is coming from. In other words, does the department have the numbers on residual groundwater pumping? What has been the impact of certain things that have happened in the AMA over time? You know, the Groundwater Management Act focused primarily on conservation as the only real tool to reach safe yield. And we knew at the time that wasn't going to be enough. So now I think there's got to be a lot of information that is given to these committees in order to enable them to figure out where the problems are coming from and possibly develop solutions to address those problems. So will the department be able to share that kind of information with the committees?
So, Kathy, I believe inside the active management areas through the mandatory reporting requirements and other elements of the programs, we can probably tease that out. We know that agriculture can pump and mine groundwater, but there's also allowable mining of groundwater in industrial and municipal sectors as well. And I think we can, and we will attempt at least to explain and tease out those numbers as best we can, because they're all contributors, I think, to the issue that we're seeing, and all need to be addressed, in my opinion, as we move through the council process or the committee process. So I will throw this out to the council. Is there value at all for the next council meeting to have a presentation outside of potentially the committee process on some of those issues? I know one of the questions that we tried to address in a couple of the legislative hearings was how's safe yield calculated in the first place, and we did a pretty brief presentation in those. But some of those things are things we can share with the entire council, I think, to help educate everybody as we move forward. I think that will be good background information. So those are certainly 2 things that come to the top of my mind within the active management areas. How does some of this actually work? What pumping is being offset and what pumping is being mined pumping, and then how we calculate safe yield, what goes into to that calculation from the department's historical calculation. So I'd be certainly happy right now, or you can send us and Cindy at her email address other items that you think are worthy of full council kind of educational type presentations. So, I think that would be a great presentation. Yeah, I saw a lot of heads shaking yes, so we will plan on doing that at the next full council meeting as well. So again, we will, when we set with the co-chairs the first committee meetings, we obviously will post that information on our website. So this council, there's a hot topic section on our homepage. You'll be able to link into this council there. But since this will be the first meeting of 2 new committees, we will also send notice of that first meeting to all of the council members individually when we work that out, so we can get as much participation in that first meeting as possible. So let me move to the next slide. So before we go to closing remarks, any other concerns, questions, issues that we might have talked about at the first meeting that are not being addressed sufficiently through the processes you've heard about today? Bass. Bass is kindly, even though I said his name first, deferring to you. So go ahead, Scott.
No, I apologize.
A couple of things. Actually, 3 things. One is all these subcommittees that are going to be meeting, I think if notices could come out to the committee members, so if they want to attend and can go that, they may not be listed, but they may want to, attend a meeting or 2. I think it's important. Secondly, transparency is real important. There was a note after the last meeting that I saw a note from you that said something that said after the meeting somebody called and said, oh, I want, this topic addressed. That's okay, but in my view, we're all sitting here at the table, and Rob wants something addressed. He can say it, and I can say I don't like that, or I can say I love it, or whatever. And I think that we should have that, make sure that process continues. And then finally, responsibility. This went through an extensive and a different little format of this that led to legislation and that, and there were some commitments made publicly and openly, and apparently some things changed, and maybe commitments can't happen. I think we as commission members, whatever we say, whatever we commit, whatever we do here, we are responsible for. And I will take that for myself. I'll say I will be responsible. So that's all I have.
Okay, Scott. I apologize, Bass. I just didn't know if you could see me down here, Tom. A couple of things that we brought up last time, and I presume they've been considered, and it's been decided they won't be addressed, but I know Dave and some others brought up adjudication reform. I understand the trickiness of that, given the court's jurisdiction, but I do still think that's something that we may want to consider at some point. Also, forest health and watershed health in general. I know that we're going to be including that information in the long-term augmentation subcommittee report, so that may be sufficient. We'll have to wait and see. I'm sitting on that subcommittee. We'll see what the report looks like, but I do think that's also something that we might want to consider as a group at some point.
So certainly we have not precluded the possibility of additional committees. I will just give you my view on the adjudication issues, and I think the Kyle Center has taken that up as one of their big issues, and I think a lot of good work has been done there. unless the council sees the need to address maybe some specific proposals that might be legislative that come out of that work, I'm not sure that there's a lot this council can do in terms of adjudication reform, if that's the right word. But if people really feel strongly that we need a committee of the adjudication, I'd like to hear that now from the members of the council. Warren.
Tom, it may be useful at some time in the future to have maybe an update of what some of the progress is. I think where the council could be of help is if there's a point where there could be some pressure placed on attorneys, particularly, to be able to keep moving things forward. Sometimes it seems like we all know how slow the process has been, and so I would just suggest if there's a possibility in the future, I don't know what it would look like, where we could be of some assistance to put some pressure to keep things moving on it, then that would be maybe worth considering.
So I see Sarah shaking her head, so perhaps that's an agenda item for the next council meeting, an update on that work and where that's at. And I appreciate, Scott, your willingness to take a look at how the watershed and forest health issue comes out in the report and potentially move forward from there if we need to get more directly involved in that issue specifically. So any others, issues, questions before we move to the closing? So seeing none, we do have a date targeted for our next meeting of September 12th, 10 o'clock here in this same room, and then looking out, December 3rd, same time again, same place here at DWR. And again, here's the link to the webpage if you want to go directly there. And of course, Cindy's email address if you want to get comments and notes. And Bass, your point was well taken. We will make sure that if folks come forward with ideas that they are thrown out on the table here at the council meeting. So we do have a comment from one of our members on the telephone. So are we ready for that, Teresa? Okay. So I guess, are there any comments from folks on the phone? Hopefully we waited the requisite 8 seconds. Senator Kerr.
Yes, Director. I just wanted to make mention, our last meeting, Director Cabrera brought up the issue with the wastewater situation between Mexico and Nogales, and because of that, Representative Griffin was able to get the language in the budget and get that funding from the state so that those federal fundings could be secured to resolve that issue. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that was a part of that, making that happen. I think that's really valuable.
Representative Griffin.
Thank you. Also, we were able to get some funds for the small water systems as well in the budget. So this is how we do it. So if we're not aware of the issues, we can't address it. But I want to thank everybody for their help on those issues. Thank you.
And I'll just say, in relation to the Nogales issue, I don't think folks have a true appreciation for how much work Misael has done, beating the bushes, so to speak, and pushing really hard on many of us, including me, for DWR's help and others out there to make all of this happen. And thanks to you all for coming up with that legislation as well. We have a great opportunity there to resolve that issue. We have a great opportunity to potentially protect that flow continuing to come into the Santa Cruz River watershed and into Santa Cruz River, and that's one of the potential elements here, that we might do a new minute with Mexico to make that happen. And I I have offered DWRs and my assistance to Misael. If we get into a negotiation at that minute, it will be with many of the same folks who we negotiated minute 319 and minute 323 with, and many of the same folks in the U.S. side on the International Boundary and Water Commission, and those relationships are always important to achieve success. So I have committed some of my time to Misael to that end as well. I think we have covered all of the agenda items. We have 3 minutes if anybody from the audience wants to address the council on issues on this agenda. Seeing none, I will just close by saying I think folks are aware that on May 20th, I was standing on top of Hoover Dam signing the drought contingency plan, interstate and intrastate documents. I just want to thank everybody who had a hand in making that happen, many of you in this room. It was a great day, and now it's on to the renegotiation of the guidelines. And we'll be reaching out to many of you to have discussions about that in the very near future. But thank you, everyone, and this meeting is adjourned.
Congratulations, Nogales. Interceptor. That's great. It's actually even more. Actually, won't share probably yet, but we're on a roll. Yeah. Very good. I am, yes. I was going to introduce you. Tim, are you getting enough help?